So I've got kind of a legal question, but honestly, it started with something pretty small and dumb, and I feel bad about how it went, so let me just walk you through the whole thing. First, some background on my yard. My property lines up pretty close to my neighbor's place, and right there on the edge of things, my neighbor has a concrete pad set up as a little basketball court, and because of that court, the neighborhood kids are over there constantly, all the time, which, honestly, is fine by me. Kids should be outside playing basketball instead of sitting inside all day. I like that they've got somewhere to go. The one small thing is that these kids are always leaving their stuff on my grass. Bikes, backpacks, water bottles, whatever they showed up with, it all ends up scattered across my lawn. And most of the time, it's genuinely not a big deal. I don't want to be the grumpy guy yelling at kids about my grass. But every so often when I go to mow, I've had to go out and ask them to move their things first so I can actually get the mower through. It's happened several times over the years. Not a fight, just a, "Hey guys, can you grab your bikes real quick?" That kind of thing. So this is important for what happened. It's the first time I'm mowing this year. Spring's just getting going, and the grass has gotten away from me a little. It's a few inches higher than it really should be, the kind of shaggy, overgrown grass you get on that first cut of the season when you've let it go a bit too long. Remember that grass being tall because it matters a lot. So I'm out there mowing, and one of the neighborhood kids comes over to shoot some hoops. And even though I'm right there, actively mowing, he sets down the basketball he brought with him right in my grass. Just plops it down in the lawn I'm in the middle of cutting. Now, I'm working my way across the yard in rows, the way you do, and I can see I'm going to get to where that basketball is sitting. And here's the part I want to be really honest about, because I've gone over it in my head 100 times since. As I'm coming up on it, I made eye contact with that kid several times. Several times. I'm looking right at him, sort of waiting for him to notice his ball is in my path and come grab it. And he just doesn't. He's off doing his thing. So I get right up to it and I think, you know what? Whatever. It's a basketball. I'll just nudge it with the front of the mower and it'll roll off out of the way. No harm done. So I bump it with the mower and the ball rolls off to a patch of grass I'd already cut. Fine. And I keep pushing forward, past where the ball had been sitting. And that's when I heard it. This loud, awful clunking and crackling sound, like I'd just run straight over a rock buried in the lawn. You know that specific sound, that grinding crunch that makes your whole body clench up because you know instantly you just hit something you weren't supposed to hit. I killed the mower right away and my stomach was already dropping before I even looked down. Except it wasn't a rock. It was the kid's iPhone. It had been sitting in the tall grass right next to where he'd set the basketball down, completely hidden in those extra few inches of overgrown spring grass. I never saw it. I couldn't have seen it. When he'd put the basketball down, he must have set the phone down right there next to it in the same motion, and the grass just swallowed it whole, and I ran the mower right over it. The thing was mangled, screen shattered, case cracked, the whole deal. There was no fixing that phone. It was done. The kid was upset, obviously. Really upset. His phone's destroyed right in front of him, and there's not much a 12-year-old can do with that except stand there looking heartbroken. And I did feel bad. I genuinely did. There's no version of running over a kid's phone where you feel good about it, even when it wasn't really your fault. But at the same time, if I'm being completely honest with you, my gut reaction in that moment was also, man, you should have said something. You should have grabbed your stuff when you saw me coming, the way I was sort of standing there waiting for you to. I'd looked right at him more than once. But he's a kid, and a broken phone is a genuinely rough thing for a kid, so the feeling bad won out over the being annoyed pretty quick. So he heads home, and about 30 minutes later, his mom comes marching over to my place, and she is not happy. She tells me, flat out, that I broke her son's phone and that I am responsible for replacing it. She says I should have told him to move his stuff because I'm the adult here, and it was on me to make sure he was clear of the mower. And I want to be clear, I didn't get defensive or nasty about it. I stayed polite the whole time. I told her I was genuinely sorry about the phone and I meant it. But I also, respectfully, declined to pay for it. Because in my mind, I hadn't done anything careless. I'd been mowing my own lawn. Her son had left his phone hidden in the tall grass and hadn't moved it, even when I was looking right at him. I felt for the kid, but I didn't think a broken phone in those circumstances was mine to eat. So I said no, as kindly as I could. And she did not take that well. She looked me dead in the eye and said, "I promise you, you will be paying for it." And then she just turned around and stormed off. And I stood there in my own yard, feeling that particular knot in your stomach you get after a confrontation with a neighbor, where you know you're probably in the right, but you also hate that it happened at all, because now they're this bad blood with somebody who lives 100 feet away from you, whose kid plays in your yard every single day. That's not a comfortable thing to be sitting with. And now I'm sitting here not totally sure what she's planning to do next. Before she left, she mentioned something about having a friend who's a lawyer, so I guess she could try to take me to some kind of civil court over it. So my questions are basically these. Am I actually legally responsible for replacing this phone? And even if I'm not, if she really did decide to drag me to court over a kid's phone, wouldn't that end up costing everyone way more than the phone is even worth? I'll keep you posted if anything comes of it. Update. So I told you I'd keep you posted, and I've got an update, and I have to be honest with you. It went in a completely different direction than I expected. A better one. Let me tell you what happened. The very next day, around noon, there's a knock at my door. And it's the mom. But this time, her son is standing right there beside her. And before I can even really brace myself for round two, she does the last thing I expected. She apologizes. She tells me she's sorry for how she acted the day before, and she explains what had actually been going on in her head. See, when her son first came home with a smashed phone, she had gotten it into her mind that I had broken it on purpose, that I'd deliberately run over his phone to teach him some kind of lesson about leaving his stuff in my yard, because I'd asked the kids to move their things before. That's the story she'd built up, and that's why she came over so hot. But her son, at some point after the dust settled, had sat her down and explained to her what really happened. That it was his fault. That he'd left his phone in the tall grass and hadn't moved it, and that I'd only nudged the ball and had no way in the world of seeing a phone hidden underneath. He owned up to it. To his own mom, who was already furious on his behalf and ready to fight for him, he stood up and said, "No, Mom, it was me. It wasn't him." And I've got to tell you, I thought that was genuinely commendable for a kid his age. Think about the position he was in. He had an angry parent fully prepared to go to war and get his phone replaced for him, no cost to him, no blame on him. All he had to do was keep his mouth shut and let it happen. That's what a lot of kids, honestly, a lot of grown adults, would have done. Instead, he chose to tell the truth, even though the truth put the fault squarely back on his own shoulders and probably meant no new phone. That takes a real backbone at 12 years old, and it completely changed how I saw this whole thing. The moment I heard he'd done that, whatever irritation I'd been holding on to just melted. Because a kid with that kind of honesty in him is a kid worth going out of your way for. And then she told me the rest, and this is the part that really got me. She's a single mother, and she was so stressed about the phone not because she was trying to shake me down, but because she genuinely doesn't have the means to just go replace it right now. Money's tight, and she said if it had been almost anything else of his that broke, she probably wouldn't have gotten nearly so upset. But the phone was different, because her son loves being out with the other kids over at that basketball court, all over the neighborhood, and that phone was how she kept track of him, how she knew where he was, and that he was safe. Losing it wasn't just losing a gadget. For a single mom, It was losing her way of keeping an eye on her boy. And something about that just landed with me. So here's what I did. Now, I want to be clear, I still didn't think I was legally on the hook for that phone. Even after hearing her out, if this had gone to a courtroom, I feel pretty confident I'd have been fine. But somewhere in that conversation on my porch, the whole thing stopped being about who was legally responsible for what. It just became about a struggling mom and a good, honest kid standing in front of me who could use a hand. And I happened to have a spare phone sitting around, an old iPhone 7 I wasn't using. His broken one had been a 6S, so mine was actually a slight step up for him. And I decided right there that I was going to give it to him. But I'd been reading the advice people gave me on my original post, and a bunch of you made a point that stuck with me. The point was that just handing a kid a free phone might not actually be the kindest thing in the long run, that it might teach him the wrong lesson, that when you're careless and break something, someone just swoops in and replaces it, no cost, no consequence. And that may be the better thing, the thing that would actually help him, was to let him earn it. So that's what I offered. I've got a detached garage that I'd been meaning to clean out forever and just never gotten around to. So I told the boy and his mom, if he wants to come help me clean out that garage, I'll give him the phone in exchange for the work. And you should have seen his face. He instantly lit up, just excited. I get the feeling he'd already made his peace with the idea that he wasn't getting a new phone for a long, long time, if ever, given their situation. And here was a path to one. And his mom, she was so grateful. She said absolutely he could help. So they left, and about an hour later he came back, just the boy this time, and we got to work. And I've got to say, it turned out to be a genuinely good afternoon, better than I expected. It took us about 4 hours all told. It was real work, but nothing too brutal for a 12-year-old. I had a couple cords of firewood I'd been wanting moved and stacked into a rack, so the two of us hauled and stacked wood. I had a whole pile of boxes I needed broken down, so I cut them up and had him bag them up and carry them out to the curb. He swept the whole place out at the end, and the kid worked hard. He didn't complain, he didn't drag his feet, he just put his head down and did the work, which honestly impressed me more than a little. And somewhere in the middle of it, we took a break, and I gave him a Coke and a couple slices of pizza, and we just sat and talked. And that was the part that turned it from a chore into something else. Because when you work alongside a kid for a few hours, they start to open up. He talked about the games he liked, and his friends, and school. And I started to get a picture of this kid. A good kid, a polite kid, who clearly didn't get handed a whole lot in life, and who was over the moon at the idea of earning something with his own 2 hands. There wasn't anything sad about him exactly. He was just a boy who lit up at things that a lot of kids his age would shrug at, because for him, they weren't a given. And then at the end of it all, he got his phone, and the way he held it, this hand-me-down iPhone 7 he'd earned by hauling firewood all afternoon, you'd think I'd handed him something brand new out of a box. But before he headed home, I sat him down and I had a talk with him. Nothing heavy. I just told him that he needs to pay attention to where he leaves his things, because it won't always work out like this. Sometimes you break something through your own carelessness, and there's nobody there with a spare phone and a garage that needs cleaning. Sometimes it's just gone. I wanted him to take that with him. And then I made him one more offer. I told him that if he wanted to, and if his mom said it was okay, he could mow my yard every weekend, and I'd pay him $30 a week for it. It'd probably take him a couple hours each time. And once again, that kid lit right up at the idea of making some money of his own. So I asked him what he figured he'd spend it on, and he said video games, of course. And this is honestly my favorite part of the whole thing. We actually sat down together and did a little math right there. We figured out that a new game runs about $60 these days, and as we were talking it through, I realized something. If I just handed a 12-year-old $30 in cash every single week, Saving up for that $60 game was probably never actually going to happen. That money would just kind of evaporate. A snack here, a soda there, and it's gone by Tuesday. That's not a knock on him. That's just how it is when you're a kid and you've got cash burning a hole in your pocket. So instead of lecturing him about saving, I figured we'd just build the saving right into the deal. So here's what we worked out together. I'd pay him $20 for each of the first 3 weeks. Then on the 4th week, I'd pay him $65, enough to cover the $60 game plus the sales tax on it, so the whole thing was actually accounted for and he wouldn't come up $5 short at the register, which is the kind of thing that crushes a kid. And to square up that little bit of extra, I was fronting him on that 4th week. He'd do one small additional chore, sweep off the porch, tidy up the walkway, something quick and easy. That way the numbers were honest. Nobody was just being handed anything. He works 4 weeks, he does one small extra job, and at the end he's got a game he bought entirely with his own labor. He learns that you save toward the thing you want instead of blowing it, and he learns that the money is always tied to the work. I was pretty proud of that little system, honestly. It felt fair to both of us, and it felt like it actually taught something. So that's where it all landed. And honestly, I've been turning it over in my head ever since, hoping I got it right. Because here's the thing I keep coming back to. I really hope I didn't accidentally teach that kid the wrong lesson. My biggest worry is that some part of him walked away thinking that everything just works out, that you can be careless and break something, and a nice guy with a spare phone will always appear to fix it for you. Because that's not how the world works, and it would be doing him no favors to let him believe it does. That's exactly why I made him earn the phone, why I sat him down for that talk, why I built that whole little savings plan around the games instead of just handing him cash. I wanted the lesson to be that good things come from work, and that you look after your own stuff, not that the universe just hands you do-overs. I did my best to thread that needle. I hope I threaded it. But I'll be honest with you about why this one hit me as hard as it did. And it's got nothing to do with the phone. When that mom told me she was a single mother and that she was stressed because she couldn't just go replace something like this, something in me just understood immediately and completely. Because I was raised by a single mother myself. I know exactly what that stress looks like from the inside. I remember what it's like to be the kid. And I remember watching my mom do the math on things that other families didn't have to think twice about. I know how tough that road is, for the parent and for the kid both. So when I saw a version of my own childhood standing on my porch, a struggling single mom and a good kid who just wanted to fit in with his friends, I wasn't ever really going to be able to say, "Tough luck, not my problem." That's not in me. Not with that. And there's one more piece of it. I've got a son of my own. He's just 2 years old right now. Way too little to understand any of this. But being a dad is on my mind constantly these days. This question of what I'm going to be able to teach him, what kind of man I'm going to help him grow into. And I realized, somewhere in that garage stacking firewood with somebody else's 12-year-old, that this was maybe the first real chance I'd ever gotten to do the fatherly thing, to take a kid who messed up, and instead of just punishing him or just bailing him out, actually try to guide him, to be, for one afternoon, the steady adult in a young person's life. My own son's too small for that yet. This kid needed it right now, and it felt like practice in a way, for the father I'm hoping to be. So did I get it all exactly right? I don't know. Maybe I overthought it. Maybe I underthought it. But I tried to show that kid a little bit of kindness and a little bit of wisdom in the same afternoon, and I tried to lift a bit of weight off a mom who reminded me of my own. And I've got to believe that, even if I fumbled some of the details, the shape of it was right. That's what I'm choosing to believe anyway.